Frank, I appreciate you not biting me during the session. This is Frank, and he's a Border Collie mix, probably Shepherd, I'm guessing. And this is his roadmap to success. Now, Frank is a pretty anxious dog, and I think after discussing it with the guardians, I think what's going on is he had no rules. He was exercised late in the day. He's petted so much, which I consider paying or compensating the dog, that he never had to ask for it. And so I think he got the impression that he needs to be in charge of his humans. I think he's bonded really strongly with you, with one of the guardians, and there's a little bit of a resource guardian. If the two guardians try to kiss, he gets mad at the wife, essentially, and he wants to stop that situation. So I think in order to solve these problems, we're going to have to do what I call flipping the leader-follower dynamic. And it's not through force, it's not through punishment or correction, it's through adding structure and rules and a little bit of a discipline. And so basically one of the things we talked about to begin with was petting him. Now, anything a dog is doing while we're petting is what we're reinforcing. And I think inadvertently the guardians have been reinforcing some of these unwanted behaviors by petting him when he's nervous, or when he's barking, or when he's invading their personal space, or all these other things. So to help the guardians with this, we went over what I call petting with a purpose. So if he comes up and nudges me or scratches me or barks at me, he's telling me what to do. If I do what he tells me, then that validates his perception that he's in charge of me. So instead what I do, I call that a flop. There we go. So he just went on his side. So basically what I do instead is when the dog tells me what to do, nothing happens. Other than I give him a counter order to tell him to sit, lay down, do something, some command that he knows. As soon as he does it, I pet him under his chin and I say the word sit. Now remember, dogs feel good about themselves if their nose is parallel to the ground or tilted upward. So whenever possible, try to pet him under his chin. Never pat him on top of his head. You can scratch and caress him anywhere else, just never pat on top of the head. But if all things are equal, scratch him here. And I say whatever the command word is of what he's doing. I really try to avoid caveman talk, good this, bad that, go that. Because the dogs hear, they key on the first sound that they hear. So in all those cases, the important word, the command word, I put it in the second position or greater, and he's hearing good this, good this. Good means everything, so I don't listen for it. So that's why I'm not a big fan of saying good dog. Good dog is a platitude, but the dog already knows that you're happy with them. So, if I engage with the dog by my voice, that's happy, and then that's a reward. If I'm petting the dog, that's a reward. If I'm speaking warmly to the dog, that's a reward. And I'm saying something to the dog, those are like a quadruple positive. So instead, what I do is I just pet him and say sit, or down, or crash is what the word I use. And after a while, what will happen is the dog will realize if I tell the human what to do, nothing happens. But the human tells me what to do and I do it, I get a reward. And I like being rewarded, so I'm going to start doing that behavior more and more often. And that's going to lead the dog to do what I call prepaying. He's going to come sit in front of us to ask us for attention. When he does that, make sure we acknowledge that. Remember, you have 3 seconds to correct or reward your dog. So as soon as he does that, if you see he does it with your partner, say recognize or testify or whatever the word is. And it's just a watch word that means the dog just did something you could reward them for. Dogs often are trained to do things that we don't want them to do because for dogs, attention itself is validating. So if I bark at someone and somebody yells at me to stop, then I'm getting that person's attention yelling at me. Dogs really would rather get your bad attention than no attention. And so by petting with a purpose, now we're starting to teach the dog, these are things that we like that will get my attention. And make sure when the dog offers them that we do recognize and respect and reward him for them. Now, that leads me to what I call passive training. Passive training is waiting for the dog to do something on its own, unprompted, and rewarding it in that 3-second window while saying the command word. So every time the dog comes to you, pet it and say come. Every time he lays down, pet him and say crash. Every time he sits, pet him and say sit. Every time he grumbles, pet him and say grumble, because he's a grumbler. I have a grumbler at home as well. Every time, and name all of his dog toys. The more that we can teach him these associations, now he knows things that he can do to make us happy, as opposed to thinking, because I think he thinks his job is to protect you. That's how he makes you happy, is protecting you from the invaders. Well, we don't need him to be in charge of invaders. We got that handled on our own. Okay, so we also went over some rules that we can incorporate so the humans can start acting like leaders to the dog. And for dogs, are about what they see us do. And if we don't burn the energy, it doesn't really matter to us. So like for a dog, standing up, a human standing up is the commanding position a human can be in. If I were to stand up, I'm pretty sure he would freak out and he might nip at me. So when you have guests come over, we don't want to have the guests moving unless they let us know ahead of time. And remind me about guests, and I'll do a little segment of guests I'm probably going to forget in a sec. But let's talk about rules, first of all, that we can incorporate. Since dogs are all about what they see us do, if we don't have any rules, then the dog doesn't see us acting like leaders, and no one's checking or governing their behavior, and they get the impression I'm above the law. So some of the rules that we went over: not being allowed in the furniture. Now, because when the guardians leave, he's not kenneled, but he goes and likes to lie on their bed. Well, the bed should definitely be off limits, because if the wife gets up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom and get a drink of water, she comes back to the bed, he growls at her. And so that's inappropriate. It is the wife and the husband's bed, and they're being nice enough to share it with the dog. If the dog can't behave, then it loses that privilege. So I would recommend temporarily that he would be kenneled for about a month at nighttime, so he gets a new habit of doing it. After a month, what I would do is have a dog bed in the bedroom. I'm assuming it's back there for some reason. I have no idea where it is. But I would put a dog bed there, teach him to go to the dog bed, give it a different word like I did for this one out here. And then if we're in the middle of the night and he gets up on the bed, tell him to get down. If he gets up a second time, then you are going to put him in the kennel. You shouldn't put him in the kennel without it being negative. And we don't want to make a big fanfare of it. And does he go to the kennel voluntarily? So I would just, don't try to grab him and just walk over there and throw a treat in the kennel, put him in the kennel, close the door, and then there you're asleep. So I'm going to give you an opportunity after a month to stay in the room with us. If you prove to me that you can be trusted, then you can continue sleeping in the room with us. If you prove to me that you can't be trusted, you're going to try to break the rule, then I'm going to have to put more structure into it to help you get in a new habit of doing that. Another rule would be that he had to sit before I let him in or out of a door. So if I go to the door and say sit because he wants to go outside and he doesn't sit, after waiting 3 seconds, I walk away, turn on TV, watch whatever it is we're watching here with a pretty girl, and then wait 1 minute, and then go back to the door and tell him to sit again. If he doesn't sit this time within 3 seconds, then I walk away for 2 minutes. Next time for 4 minutes, then for 8 minutes. So I'm going to keep on doubling the length of time until he sits at the door when I tell him to, and as soon as he does, I open that door like there's remote control in his butt. At first I do with whatever direction the dog wants. If he wants to go outside, start with him inside. But eventually you want to do it both ways, and eventually he'll go sit at the door as his way of saying, I would like to go outside. Now remember to use the watchwords. I say paycheck if I suspect someone's petting without a purpose. I say testify or recognize if the dog just did something and somebody missed an opportunity to pet it. I say repeat or rerun if we're saying the command word more than once. The more you say it, the less you mean it, and you'll train the dog not to listen for it. And I usually say vocabulary if we're saying different versions of it. I like the guardians to come up with a list of the command words and exclusively use one command word for each action. Not come here, over here, whistle, tap my thigh, just come. Now, if you have a word that it's hard for him to respond to, sometimes it's easier to throw away the old word to come up with a new word. So if come is still spotty, maybe you start here, or attention, or come up with a foreign language. Some people like to use German or whatever the other word is. Now, I'd like the guardians also to, whenever possible, use fun command words. We have some heaviness because of his behavior. And so I have had a number of clients that by naming things, funny names and funny command words, that brings a levity and they just bring some nice lightness to the energy in the room, and that can have a positive impact on the dog. And especially because dogs can read facial expressions. So we come up with funny command words, people are laughing, and the dog says, oh, we're not upset, we're feeling good. Let me see, what else do we go over? Well, I guess I'll go over the part of with guests. The directional command. So if he gets up on the furniture, toss a treat on the ground. When he licks it up, say the word off. Practice going to each room or area of the house and tossing a treat 3 feet out. Have the dog go out and get it and say the word out. Come back and do it again, then go to another portal. So you can do that all around the house to make sure that he understands leaving the room is a good thing. Also exercise. He's a stocky dog, but he's also a little bit overweight. And he's been free-fed. So I went over the importance of providing structured meals with the humans eating first, and then he eats whatever is in his bowl. So proportion it out so he should be able to clean his plate. So if he's supposed to be getting 2 cups a day and you're feeding him a cup in the morning and he's only eating 3/4 of a cup, then I would just go to feeding him only 3/4 of a cup until he consistently cleans his plate, then go back to a full cup. And if he goes over and sniffs it and walks away, as soon as he walks more than 5 feet away, pick it up and dump it, unless it's you, the guardian that he's not as fully enamored with, because I don't want to, and he potentially might have a resource guarding problem. We don't want that to be the case. So if that's the case, then have somebody else do it. Or have him go outside and then take the food away and dump it, but put the empty bowl back on the floor. It's important to put the empty bowl back on the floor. Now, I'd like the guardian that he is not as respectful to portion out some food. So take a handful, rub it between your hands into a Ziploc bag and put that Ziploc bag at the side. So if you're feeding, and I would prefer to have the guardian who he has nipped be the one who feeds him. But if you're going to be gone and you feed him, make sure it has your scent on it. Now, the other thing that we could do is, this takes a little bit more time, is hand feed him. There's the expression, don't bite the hand that feeds, it comes from dogs. He will not bite your hand if you're feeding him. So what I would do, and because eating is such a primally important activity, by putting your scent on it, that will really help. Even when you're not there, he still smells your scent on his food, and he needs the food. Well, what I would also do is put the bowl up wherever it is and just grab a small handful, make him sit first. Always make him do something for you, give him a treat or affection or whatever, and then let it eat out of your hand. I would use passive training to come up with a command word. So maybe say grub or chow. And so while he's eating it, the first bite we say chow. And then we just keep on feeding him. You don't have to say chow each time. I guess you could if you're hand feeding. But we just want to get to the point where you're the one providing the most important thing for him, and it's not always left in the magic bowl like it is now. That makes food a lot more powerful, and then the person who's giving it to me, I have a lot more respect for. Now, something else, dogs that are really reactive, and he's not really reactive, but he is a reactive dog. And also, see how you don't see, well, I guess you can see it here. I don't know if you can see it, but you don't see, he just kind of square. Usually dogs, it starts tapering, almost like they're wearing a corset. So for weight-wise, you should see a little bit of a taper towards his waist. Not a huge one, because he's a bigger dog. But taking out that excess weight will help him live longer, and it will reduce the stress on his joints. I had a dog that was fat for too long, and ended up having a shorter lifespan as a result. So the hand feeding, I would do that for maybe about 2 weeks. Now when you're doing it, I'm going to pantomime with him here. Let's assume he's standing. Have him taking the food out of my hand. First meal, I would just do it, just letting him take it out of your hand. Don't try to touch him. After that, what I would do is maybe the second or third meal, once he starts enamored and he starts licking it out of your hand, then I would touch him on his flank. Just touch. Don't caress. And if he stops eating, just leave your hand there unless he, gives you a sign that you don't think you really, but he probably doesn't like you touching him. We want to eventually get him used to it. So we're just going to touch and not caress. And then once he goes back to eating, then you can take your hand off. And then when you get your next portion, once he starts again, touch again. And eventually it gets to the point where there's no pause and no growling and no problems with that. Then you can start just give him a little scratch in that same area. You're not moving forward. But as we're doing it, once we get to the point where you pet him and he doesn't stop eating and he's comfortable, then we're going to gradually move our hand up a little bit higher and then a little bit closer to the head. The idea is eventually get to the point where you can have your hand underneath his chin while he's eating out of your hand. And because he's eating out of your hand, he won't bite you. And he's getting used to you touching him while food's going in. Now, when we actually get back to the point where you're putting food in the bowl, another little trick I'd like the guardian who's filming this to do is to take one of the high-value training treats I use. I use the Turkey Trainer soft and chewy chicken liver. Approach him when he's eating his bowl, but take note of him. If he stops eating or freezes, that's the point you need to stop at. That's close to his breaking point. Then what you want to do is take a treat, toss it, hopefully you get a good toss, and toss it in his bowl, and then walk away. So what you're saying is when I approach, I'm not going to take your stuff, I'm going to make your situation better. After a while, he'll look forward to you coming and approaching because that means good stuff's happening. Okay, so for some of the warning signs we want to look for, licking the lips is a classic sign of stress. Dilated pupils, also a sign of stress. Turning the head to the side and yawning can be a calming signal or a sign of stress. Dry panting, when he shouldn't be dry panting. Holding his breath or breathing really fast are also warnings. Freezing is a big warning. Or moving very slow. Moving very slow is a way of saying, I don't think I'm supposed to be doing this. I'm going really slow, so you have every opportunity to stop me. But it could also be like a warning, I'm moving really slow because I'm getting ready to take a bite out of you. So if you're doing something and all of a sudden you get a bad vibe and he starts moving slow, just kind of stop for a second, turn yourself sideways to him, take one step away, pause, take another step away, pause. If you turn your back to him, some dogs will bite you from behind, especially insecure dogs. I don't know what position he was in when he nipped you, but and so we turn sideways and we move away very methodically. We're telling the dog, yes, I am listening to what you're doing. Let me see. Now we fitted him up with a martingale collar to make, because he's been pulling, and so they're basically using a harness, but harnesses are sized for dogs to pull out of. There's a special twist to the leash. I just don't feel comfortable showing the guardians this twist because I didn't expect him to be as reactive as he is. So he's probably going to need another follow-up session. What we'd like to see is a month's worth of petting with the purpose and passive training, enforcing these rules, and him starting to adopt more of a follower's mindset. He's got basically so much cortisol in his blood that everything is amplified. And so I think some of the times he's snapping, it's not even thinking about it, it's just instinctive, just like us. If we have cortisol in our blood for too long, we can develop PTSD. Dogs can actually develop a version of this as well. And I'm not saying that he is a bad case of PTSD, but just how jittery and jumpy he is a classic sign of a dog that has too much cortisol in their blood. Now for guests, the guardians are pretty much limited having guests over because of his behavior. And so we'd like to get to the point where we're having guests come over and he's not put in his kennel, because for dogs that can be a punishment. Now, what I did when I first came in is the excitement level is something that's also reactive. Now, I didn't realize at the time when I came in that he had some human aggression. But normally what I do if the dog's really excited, when you guys come home, if he's all excited, we pet him, we're going to make him slightly more excited. So when you come home, if he's excited, just ignore him. Don't look at him, don't talk to him. He doesn't jump up on you, so we don't have to do any of those things. Wait, and as soon as he seems like he's calm, then start reaching to pet him. As soon as you do that, he'll start wiggling and get excited. There we go. I thought that was going to happen a lot sooner than it did now. But as soon as he gets wiggly, pull your arm back and continue doing about your thing. What we're saying is when you're nice and calm, you're very attractive. When you get excited, I lose interest. Now, if he's doing this sort of thing, you can redirect his attention a little bit. Now, I went over a hand targeting exercise with the guardians. Target. So right there, he had his back to his guardian, his primary guardian. That's kind of a, and again, I think that I'm looking at his eyes now, his pupils are not dilated, and his tail is a little bit low. Well, that's going higher now, but the movement it's going through doesn't tell me he's really aggressive. You can see he was staring at me from the side. And so for him, if he's doing these sort of things and I move around too much, that facilitate a nip. And so I have to act very confident about it. If I act scared, that will make it worse. So I can ask him to sit to break his behavior of what I'm doing. Then we taught him to go to the dog bed as a command. So then he's stopped. I throw it there, beach. And so now we stopped him from focusing on one thing. We gave him something else to do, which makes him feel a little bit more subordinate, the body position and listening to me. And then I move somewhere else, and you see the barking has subsided. Now, when we have guests come over, I'm almost thinking you guys' probably policy should continue to stay the way it is now until we see where he's at in about a month. And then we might do some behavior adjustment training, which is where we create a stage scenario and help him practice a behavior that we want, where we control all the elements and stack the deck in his favor so it's easy. Testify. So you can pet him right now. There you go. And I know it seems superfluous just to pet for things he's already doing. Right now, he's doing things because he doesn't know what. When I asked the guardians what he could do to make him happy, they were like, not bark and not try to bite the guest. And so those aren't really things that he can do. Sitting is a thing that's quantifiable that he can do. So the more that we can pet him for desired actions and behaviors, the more he'll want to do those. Now, one other thing I'd like the guardian to do, the one who's filming this, is go to YouTube. Look for some things to train your dog to do. Look for easy dog tricks, not a hard one. Want stuff that's very easy to master. Crash. And then basically, dogs that are insecure are the ones that are more reactive. So if we can teach him new tricks and commands, that can help him boost his self-esteem and also develop respect for the person who's teaching me those things. So we're kind of accomplishing multiple things at the same time. All right. Trying to play a little hard to get. I'm making him come to me. I'm making him SIT instead of going over to him and give him the treat. So whenever possible, always try to get him to come to you, to put the collar on to go for a walk. Make him come to you before you're going to throw the ball or whatever. And look for ways to delay gratification. If you can get him to fetch, speaking of fetch, when he has low-value items in his mouth, when he's got something in his mouth, he's not holding it, but it's in his mouth, touch his nose with this and wait for him to drop it. And he won't drop it right. Don't give him any commands. Wait. As soon as he drops it, then pop in his mouth and say drop. And we do it with the low-value items he's allowed to have at any time. That way, if he does steal, does he steal stuff? Okay, he's not a thief. But it helps setting up the fetch. So I always like to do one step that's going to help with the next one. So when it's fetch, he wants to run around with it. Eventually, when he gets done squeezing it, then he goes and puts it on the guardian's lap, and then he's ready for you to do it. Well, the guardian's rules if they're going to play the game. So when he comes to us, say, if he's accustomed to dropping things with the low value items. Then when he brings you the ball, he'll spit it at you, pick it up, throw it again. Now I would make him elicit a little bit of structure. When I pick it up, I would say sit. Once he sits, then I would throw it and say the word, I actually say fetch 3 times. Sit, when he sits, then I would throw it and say fetch. When he goes over, when he picks up with his mouth, I say fetch. When he brings it back, I put the treat in his mouth and say fetch. That way we're eventually conflating all 3 of those things together, and it's a great way to exercise him. That's one of the first things we talked about. I'm going to kind of be the last thing that we're going to talk about here is start an exercise journal for him. Now he can be around other dogs at a local dog daycare center, fine. But when he's with his guardians, that's when he gets reactive. So that again tells me that he is thinks he's on patrol. Now he's a high energy dog. He goes to daycare for 8 hours. He still comes home and he still has energy. So that tells me that, and he's getting basically a walk right now at the end of the day. What I like the guardians to do is look for different ways to exercise him. He seems pretty interested in the laser without being too manic. That's a good way to do it. Fetch is a great way to do it. I actually do something called dog skiing. I put on rollerblades and put my dog on a harness and I have him pull me for about 2 to 3 miles. That is one of the most efficient ways to, because he gets to pull as much as he wants. And if I see another dog, he barks at him as he's passing by. I'd mess you up, but I'm pulling my human right now. And then when he comes home, he is exhausted. Basically, I'd like the guardians to look for different ways. And something else you can do is Google scent games. Using a dog's brain is almost as draining as, it's almost sometimes more draining than using physical means to deplete their energy. So basically, and if we do have guests come over, make sure we set him up for success. Make sure he goes to daycare that day. When they, if we can, take them out for a walk with the guest before they come in the house. Those are things that can help. But basically, for him, because right now he's getting a walk in the end of the day, he's percolating, keeping all that energy all day long. So what I like the guardians to do is for a month, keep an exercise journal. Write down the date at the top and write down the time and whatever the exercise was. That's a good flop. And then also if there are problems or setbacks, he freaked out at the fence, he had a barking episode, whatever it was, and the times that you feed him. After a while, we can start looking back. If there's an incident, we look back at how long has it been since he's had exercise? How long has it been since we did some training exercises or whatever it is? And the more of those things, after a while, we start figuring out an actual roadmap to success for him, even though this is a roadmap to success, but in terms of exercise for him to feel good throughout the day. Now for the hand targeting exercise, try to do that with about, I would do that with maybe about anywhere from like 6 to 12 treats. Now at first when I do it, if the dog's head is here, I flash my hand and keep it at an angle like this, not up and down, not like that. And remember, once you put your hand down, wait for the dog's nose to go there, then I take the treat and put it here. Don't move this hand to the treat, keep it static. Now first what I do is, if the dog's head, I just do it right, so it's like an inch away. Then I started doing it a little bit further, he had to lean for it. Eventually now we want to do it far enough where he has to take a step towards it. And eventually you can get to the point with my dog, I can go like this, and my dog is following my hand around wherever I go. I can do circles and make him go around my legs. It's a great way to get them to redirect, and he's doing it for a treat, but it's a nice way to redirect his attention away from something else. I think it might be something to be really beneficial. Now, like I said, because of his reactivity, I'm guessing we're going to need to do a 1-hour follow-up session. Just call us in about 2 weeks. Let us know how things are coming along. I'm usually booked up about a month in advance, but 1-hour follow-up sessions we can schedule a little bit more flexibility. But the more that we have rules, structure, and discipline and help him develop self-control, the less cortisol he's going to have in his blood, which is going to help him be more relaxed in general. The more exercise we get is going to have a benefit for that. The more we pet with the purpose of passive training, now he knows things that he can do that do make us happy, as opposed to barking and trying to nip people that we don't. All right, well, this is Frank. Frank, can we do one more target? I need you on camera. There you go, there's one. How about if we just do it the old-fashioned way? This is Frank. This is Frank's roadmap to success. Sit. Sit. Always say the command word after the treat goes in the mouth. Remember, everything you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you mean it. Focus. Focus.